What's up? It's Cody from the Keepers of Nerdom. How y'all doing? I thought today would be a great day to finally talk about Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. It just came out on Disney Plus last week, Wednesday or Thursday it was, I think. And so we were finally at that point where there was reviews of it in the theaters. I didn't really want to go see it in the theaters, but I thought, you know what? Let's finally watch it because I still am intrigued, and I haven't gotten to watch a Marvel movie or a show in a little while. Just haven't been interested. I still need to go back and watch She-Hulk and a few others, the Miss Marvel show as well. So this was a fascinating film, and let's get into it. Was it good? And I think there's one thing to note right away off this image right here is just this. Do you notice anything that's changed on here? That this is very much a female-driven movie, and just take from that whatever you want. It's just an interesting piece to the puzzle, and fascinating, right? I really, really enjoyed the Black Widow film, so very much a female-driven movie, but it also needed to come out a few years earlier because it just felt like a prequel thing that was too little too late. And that's unfortunate because it was a cool concept. But this movie, was it good? That's one of those pieces because first off, female leads versus male leads, oftentimes it's a question of does it generate the same amount of money or less? And as of right now, let's look it up really fast. I'm curious what this movie made because unfortunately there are times where that can have impact, but also it's just interesting. I don't know. It tops 800 million worldwide, and that was December 26, 2022. Let's check Black Panther itself, because these may not have been like the top movies, but Black Panther, the first one, made 1.3 billion, and it's currently the number it doesn't fill in. But this is just an interesting thing. Why did it make less money? Was it because of casting? Obviously these are people that were already in the previous film. Was it just because of female versus male leads? I don't know that was necessarily it, but I think there's something going on at Disney and Marvel that's rather fascinating, and I want to look at several of these characters because some of them are very fleshed out and fascinating, and some other pieces of the film are not. So let's go through this. The first one I think we should talk about is Shuri, because she is definitely the main person focus in this film. We'll go down to the very end of like full-on storyline, so there'll be more spoilers there as well if you haven't seen it yet. Shuri really is a character driven by one major thing, and it's loss, and I guess really two things then, loss and revenge. And those are powerful story motivators. And she becomes way more of an interesting character than she was in previous things, just because she was a background character at best that was like, here's the younger sister that's just trying to live in the shadow of older brother who is king, and she just wants to be super, super smart and, not really goof off, but also not necessarily have the biggest interest in all of the political stuff. So she is an interesting piece of this puzzle. Like she's fascinating. I enjoyed having her as a focused character because at first I was nervous about that because she wasn't a whole lot of an interesting character initially in the other films. Like she was kind of a side character, background character. But yet she really comes out of her shell in the action, and that anger and that hurt whenever the actress portrays it, I think is really good. There's a lot to have there. The next character that I think is a big part of this, and if you watch any trailers, you know, it's Namor. The one thing I will say first off is just he is very different from what I remember of the comic books. Comic book Namor is very arrogant, very over the top. I am the best. I will win no matter what. And in this film, the portrayal, I actually, some of the reviews I'd heard was he was just very subdued or cowed, but it's actually more he's just a smart leader in that he's not just trying to be the most braggart and the biggest ego in the room. Although I would say there's some actions he takes that it's like you're causing some very serious uh, diplomatic repercussions and some questions in the movie itself that don't necessarily add up. But I think this portrayal is very different from the comic books, but it's also a fascinating portrayal. So it's like I both enjoyed it, but I also was expecting him to be so much more arrogant because that's what we had seen. And so this was just different. And if you're going to say you're basing off of source material and really trying to be accurate to it, I would say that should be a key there. So the next character that we should talk about that has changed pretty drastically, and not in the sense of actually different character by any means, but just overall focus. He's more than he was in the past. I'm actually really glad for this, is M'Baku. It's funny because I remember him being like an evil character, if memory serves, in comic book stuff at points. I don't know if he turns around or not, but I actually have always enjoyed the movie's version of him, even though it is changing the comics, just because they play him as though he's this villain when he's often just misunderstood, and he's always just wants Wakanda's best interests at heart. And some of the conversations that he has with Shuri are just fantastic, and he's wanting the best interests for the Wakandan people, and also challenges her thoughts and belief systems. And I think that's really important, that he becomes this sage, and he's one of the few, at least on the Wakandan side, guy presences in the movie, and I think he's actually very standout because it's a fascinating thing that in ways he's a background character, but when he shows up and has these good conversations, I think it really matters in the movie. So there's some really good things in this film, like those conversations. And another piece that happens, as you're noticing, there are several guys that show up in this film, but the focus is a lot on those female characters, except for like Namor would be probably your other main focus. And the other two are these, and this is some spoiler stuff, but there is a point where Shuri gets to have some vision with one of these characters and then some remembrance of another, and it's heartwarming because Chadwick Boseman passed away, and obviously that definitely changed a bit of what Marvel was going to do. And I think they had a really interesting question that they had to figure out of, do we recast or do we just say Black Panther is dead? And that's a fascinating journey there, right? A hard decision. But Killmonger appears in a side way here, and really, just spoilers at this point, he shows up as part of a vision through Shuri taking the herb that they finally were able to perfect and bring it back to life. And it's an interesting conversation because he really wants to push her towards revenge and to take and to be the most powerful. And it's almost as though these are two sides of a very, very epic Wakandan coin, that one really would be like, no, we need to find a better way, because Black Panther had, T'Challa had that thing where he was trying to take revenge as well for the death of his father, and Shuri at this point, trying to take revenge for the death of her mother. And at the beginning of this film, she loses her brother. Like they do this interesting thing at the beginning, right, where Black Panther T'Challa is killed off screen essentially, and it's epic and like crazy and just sad, but it's also like they put it as Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which actually it is a Black Panther film because Shuri then eventually takes on that role, and she starts to understand that the future is based also around culture and remembrance, that it's not just trying to find the new best thing, it's also remembering where you've come from, especially once she takes the heart-shaped herb and just starts to realize that there's a connection that every Black Panther shares once they take it. It's a fascinating part of the film that it's very small. These two characters are a very small part of the film, but again, I think it's the conversations in this film that really hit home. And they hit home in a big way. One of the next things, I just need to talk about this because there's a moment in the film where Wakanda finally decides that they are going to take the fight to the Atlanteans, or the Namor's people. And I can't remember the Tenochtitlan or something, and that's not the right word, but basically the underwater dwellers and what happens with them. and they do this epic fight, and the Wakandans bring this really big ship with a sound device that knocks people out for a while and or stops them from getting on. But I think this is the point where I just need to get into not just characters, but some weird issues in the film that are strange to me. This ship is like the most weird, not plot hole, but like strategic issue, because their whole strategic plan is to bring Namor out and then capture him in one of their flyer things and dry him out with super heat lamps. Not a bad plan in that sense, but when you're over the water with a boat, when you're fighting fish people that have vibranium, and I mean, it's just, you're in a weird spot. This is not a good plan. But again, Shuri is not in a right frame of mind that even M'Baku tries to talk her down from this, that there's a better way to do this, and revenge is not like the answer, is what I remember from his conversation with her. And so just this whole scene just was so ridiculous, because you're like, you went to the water after they came into Wakanda, which again, this doesn't make sense that Wakanda was that easily breached by people from the water. Like, give me a break. If that's the case, Wakanda is nowhere near as impressive as we think. And then they decide to go onto the water and fight. And I get it again that Shuri is not thinking in her right mind, but still, this is bad. Like, this is just a bad plan. You're asking for Namor to just absolutely wreck you. If he was able to get into the heart of Wakanda and kill the queen, right? Are you really? Like, don't do this. You might have some plans, but they are so much apparently stronger than you, and because they got into Wakanda. That's what gets me. It's just a funny thing. The really thing that I think hurts this movie, and even in the trailers, I can't tell if this picture up on the top right is actually real, but if it is, because I watched the movie and I think it looked better than this, but if this was what it looked like, and my memory is just playing tricks on me, because sometimes, you play an old video game and it looks like epic in your head, but then when you go back and look at it in the moment, you're like, oh my goodness, that was a terrible looking game. Like, it's just, bad graphics because it was from Xbox original era or even early 360, right? It just doesn't hold up, but yet in your mind, it looked so much better than it did. It's almost like when you play old school Battlefront 2 versus new Battlefront 2. In my mind, old school Battlefront 2 looks almost as awesome as the new one. Like, its graphics are just as good, and yet when I go back and play it, I go, oh yeah, this is not. But I'm still having a blast because it's a great game, right? So Riri Williams is in this film. The trailers gave that away real fast, and we see Ironheart in some version, and yes, that's supposed to look like essentially her shoulders into her chest make up a heart. Like, it's that on the nose. Like, they're going to call her Ironheart and show her with a heart. And it was moments like this where the CGI just really fails the film, which is really sad considering, it feels like sometimes Iron Man 1 has better CGI than many of the scenes in this film. And that was how many years ago, right? Like, we are way past that. We're over 10 years. Like, it's been a long time. We're probably closer to 15 now. Oh my goodness. But she's okay, but that's about it. Like, she's just kind of a side character that happens to be super smart. And it's, again, I guess I have a problem with really, really, really smart young people. Just because, it doesn't really happen in the same, in the real world, in the same way. Like, a super, super smart person that's younger, they end up writing papers or doing super epic math, right? That it doesn't necessarily lead to building a super suit. Some of that would come with experience and time. And it's just interesting. I don't know. The bigger issue is CGI here, and she just felt like a character that they just needed to add in for an extra plot device. Yeah, that's about the summation I have of her. I don't remember what these things were called, these suits of armor. When they're standing still, they look decent, because then I think parts of them are now not CGI, or at the very least it's way easier for them to map. But I will say these were the most rubber-looking things in the entire film, right? These suits, for some reason, it was bizarre. Like, they would start moving and it would just look like rubber. like not real rubber, but just, like silly putty goo on a screen that doesn't match up with what they're wearing. And what was funny was whenever the CGI helmet would backtrack away from their face, the rear of the plate that's got like the tentacle hair thing on the back, it would be so far back on their heads, and the ladies often that were wearing these, are bald. It just looked funny, like it didn't look right. So the CGI was just bizarre in this film, and especially with these and Riri Williams' Ironheart suit. But these were definitely the worst of those two. Like the CGI. Sorry, the CGI was just bizarre, and I don't know, what else to say other than it feels like Marvel's paying way less for their CGI and trying to make these awesomely epic movies. And it's just kind of sad to me because a movie, you want it to hold up for a long time. And I'm like, I can still go back and watch Iron Man 1. And the one time that I really feel like it's really putty, like the CGI, is whenever he's walking out of the cave in the Iron Man Mark 1. Like you can tell pretty quickly that it's CGI, and then other moments it's just hard. It's really hard to tell that the suit is CGI because they did a much better job, at least in my mind, right? But you go back and watch, sometimes it's not what you think. But I remember it and watched it several times just to look at that. And when they're coming out of the cave in Iron Man 1, it looks rubbery and looks silly and fake, but then every other time in the movie it looks really good. It's bizarre to me. It's like they spent more time, energy, and effort on that to make it look good. And then in moments like this, in a newer film with a probably bigger budget, because let's see, what was Wakanda Forever's budget? So $250 million. And let's see what Iron Man 1's was. I bet it was nothing. Budget was $140 million, so $110 million more for this movie. And it just really makes you wonder, where did the money go? I always wonder that about new films, especially when they have problems like the CGI, and it's just bizarre to me. And I always wonder, you couldn't throw an extra million of the 250 towards CGI to really get it up to that next level. I just wonder about that, right? But thankfully it's not like DC levels of bad with like the Joss Whedon cut of the Justice League. You know what I'm saying, right? This is just, that's a whole different level. So this is interesting. But the last little part, right, is just the story itself. Yeah, let's just talk about it for a moment here, right? Because overall the story, I think, is the one part that I both really liked, but also it fell apart because, oh, I missed a slide here to share with you guys as well. There's a character in here that's completely pointless, and it's part of that story is Everett Ross, the agent that they always had in the first film, and he's just kind of feels pointless. It's like he's there and mildly useful-ish, but not really, and it just wastes time. Because story-wise, this movie has at its heart a great story, and I think like even Thor: Love and Thunder had actually a great story at the heart of it, but Thor: Love and Thunder was lost in that because it just went too funny and silly. And I think Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, what actually happened to it was really something very simple. What went wrong was just too many storylines going and not concluding quickly. And so the movie gets really bloated, because I think it's close to 3 hours. Let me see, because I think it's massive. I remember watching 2 hours and 41 minutes, and it feels that long. Like it was a long film. Like there are movies of that length that I feel like I haven't been sitting there, right? And this movie, I felt like I was sitting there because there was a lot of moments where they would just stop and just have conversation. And some of those conversations, like in Baku with Shuri, were really good. Or even sometimes sharing a little bit of the story of like Namor's people and what happened. Not necessarily bad, but it just continues too long to the point where it's dragging the movie. And that breaks my heart, because you've got this interesting thing at the beginning of Black Panther dies, and then the sorrow, and then the international community wanting to try to break into Wakanda and steal stuff, and they get caught, and then somebody tries to raid for any vibranium stuff that they're trying to get out of the ocean, and so the world countries think it's Wakanda, and so then Wakanda goes to discover who it is and find out it's the fish people, and that they're also trying to, if memory serves, there's like a conversation then when Namor reveals himself to the Wakandans and asks for them to capture this person and bring him to him, so that way basically he can just remain hidden. So it's like all the plot points actually follow decently. It's just so long. And there's a point then whenever the Wakandans and the Atlanteans, they fight, and Shuri gets captured and Okoye gets kicked out of her role, and it's awkward. And it's just interesting, right? And then we have like a lot of stuff under the water where Shuri talks with Namor and history and all this stuff. And she gets rescued by her friend. And then they go back to Wakanda after all this happens. And then Namor attacks. And then eventually, this is like high points of like really fast, but it's super slow because there's things right in between all of these pieces, because they're trying to rescue Riri and then trying to rescue Shuri and then go back to Wakanda and they get attacked, and then Shuri figures out the heart-shaped herb and has the vision with Killmonger, and it's just a lot. And then they go attack, and that fight scene lasts forever, even though they're just on a boat, which should have been over in like 10 minutes. And then at the end, it's whenever Shuri beats Namor. It's funny because when you go back to the boat, like the Wakandans, there's like 10 of them left, or 15 at most, and they're terrible. Like, it's just going really badly. And you go, they're fish people on a boat with spears, and you guys, some of you are in armor, and some of you have been trained with this. I just thought you'd give a little bit better fight. But anyway, it's a lot of conversations in between. So this movie itself is good concept, but too slow, I think, is really where I land in all of this, because even at the end, there's some really cool concluding notes and some high points for Marvel in the future, but it's also like, cool, that's a lot of information. There's a lot of stuff. And oh, by the way, Everett Ross was in this movie, just so you know, right? So yeah, Wakanda Forever is a fascinating film that I think overall is nowhere near bad by any means. It reminds me almost of Thor 2. That Thor 2 is, to me, a good film, but it's slow. And I think that's where this movie ends as well, is it's a good movie, but it's slow. Just has a little too much talking and a little too much time and a little too much seriousness. And it loses its way underneath that I could understand that it's not going to make as much money as the original movie. But also, it's going to be hard when you've got Chadwick Boseman gone, right? That was a big draw, and so Marvel's trying to figure out what's next, and that's tough. So let me know down in the comments below. Have you seen this movie? What did you think of it? What was your favorite parts? What had stood out to you? What were the parts that just didn't make any sense to you? Because I didn't really talk a whole lot about like any plot holes. I didn't write stuff down for that, but I know there was a couple that I went, wait a minute. But really, it was like the boat scene, right? Let's backtrack. Boop, 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 boop. The boat scene. Like, do not attack with this. But again, who's in charge? It's Shuri, right? And she does what she wants. But it's like, Wakanda just has this thing. How big is this thing? I want to know how much further underneath the water it goes. Because why do they just have this? Did they just build this in 20 minutes? I don't understand. Like, just nothing explained about this, and it's just they show up with this big boat. Oh, okay, we've never seen this boat, and maybe it was in the background of this somewhere in the movie. I don't know, but let me know down in the comments below. What you thought of this. Like and subscribe. Yeah, let's have a conversation about this in the comments. Take care. I've been Cody from the Keepers of Nerdom. Bye, y'all.